Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 30 of the Movement is Medicine podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Carr. And today I'm joined by a very special guest just north of the border in Massachusetts, PJ Strebel of Maxway Performance in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. How are you today?
Good, Kevin. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, my pleasure. For those of you who don't know PJ's been a friend of mine for a long time. I met him, kind of through Mike Boyle's strength and conditioning pipeline, through CFSC, through the seminars, and he's someone who I've got to see his career grow and change. And I know PJ's going to get into his story here, and I want to ask him some questions during the podcast, kind of about his progression, about where he started. But I've seen him go from being, a coach like many other people, working in a health club, turning a ton of sessions every day, coaching his ass off, to then, eventually, striking off on his own, as many people want to do and talk about and are often scared of, going in, starting his own gym and starting his own business, and seen him successfully grow that facility to the point where he outgrew the facility he's in, and recently expanded. Was it last year?
Yeah, so we just celebrated 1 year this February. So we're about 18 months in or so into the new facility. But it's been a journey to open kind of 6 months pre-COVID, weather that storm, and then about 12 months post-COVID to actually move into a bigger facility. So
it's been cool to be able to watch that progression and see you go through that. I know I was saying to you just briefly before this how, like, on the strengthcoach.com forum, the most frequent questions we get are like, hey, I'm thinking about opening a facility, or I am opening a facility. I have questions about staffing, facility size, equipment, pricing, all these things. And it's always good to answer people there. But I think the best thing you can do is have a conversation with someone who's done it and probably made mistakes, and figured it out and gone. And that's what Mike has been for us as a resource. But then, hearing from other people, because everyone's environment and gym setting is a little different. So I think you'll be a great resource for that. So welcome to the podcast. Cheers.
Cheers.
I have a banquet beer straight from Golden, Colorado.
No dice. Liar's Bench, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Shout out.
Yeah, a New Hampshire special. Wonderful.
I have a new koozie, Kev. I'll have to get you one.
So yeah, I'll do a trade. We have a CFSC koozies. So we'll do a straight up trade. I'm just going to work my way through our group text till I get everybody on here. So, I've had Vinny. Who else did I have? I've had you. That might be it so far. Dan's going to get on here. Steve's going to get on here. So, and of course, Brendan, he counts, I guess. So, I'm going to just kind of check up and see where you're at, because I know for us right now, MBSC, we're kind of winding down on our summer session. This is our last week with our kids of like our official summer session. So a lot of our fall college sports athletes have already gone, headed to camp this week. Yep. A lot of our college athletes have taken off. Now high school kids are starting to trickle off at the end of this week, and there'll just be some pro athletes kind of hanging around until NHL camps start. So how's your summer gone, and where are you guys at right now?
Yeah, so I think that we're pretty similar to you guys, where we've just been kind of full on for the summer. It's been a blast having all the college kids back. A lot of the prep school kids come back for the summertime, and they kind of rip it from middle of May all the way until kind of this week. So it's a good energy to have in the gym, which is really nice. But I think our adult population, and I think our coaching staff is ready for a more routine schedule. I think it's because they're just long days. They're quick weeks, but they're long weeks during the summertime. So I think that we're excited. We're doing a lot of send-offs this week, so it's bittersweet, where it's a bummer to see them go back to school, but we're excited to see what they're going to do this fall. So we're excited to see and keep up with all the kids going away, playing their sports, and the kids going into high school preseason and doing all that kind of stuff. But we do see a little bit of intake with some of our winter athletes that kind of come back in this fall, where like the hockey, or not the hockey kids that do the split season, but the basketball players, things like that. Some wrestlers that come in that kind of were busy all summer with some tourneys and kind of their showcase series or whatever, but want to take the fall up. So we're pretty excited where we are. We're ready to kind of get back into routine. I know I personally have a little bit of a different routine. My oldest is going to kindergarten, so I'm going to be balancing kind of my coaching schedule with that. But the K through 8 school is actually right up the hill. So I'm thinking about we're going to do like some walking series where I'll do like walk clubs where I'm going to be walking kids from the gym or from the school down to the gym for our after school sessions, and my kindergartner is going to be tagging along. So
There you go. And I want to kind of touch
oh,
on that kind of community based things a little bit later. And I would say this time of the year is kind of bittersweet for us, right? Like the summer is an absolute grind. And usually I know with ours, like our Gen Pop and personal training clients have like a love-hate relationship with the summer. They like the energy from the athletes. They hate the crowding.
yeah.
And they hate that there's sometimes kids like flying around in there with no sense of control or no sense of their surroundings. But I know our coaches are looking forward to having a breather.
Too.
Yeah, for sure. Our coaches are looking forward to kind of having a breather next week. I know because next week's kind of like a bye week. You know, we just have adult groups and personal training, no kids, and then we'll hit the ground running after Labor Day. But like you said, you know, it's sad to see them go, but you're excited to see them, you know, compete. That's what they're here for, right? And so we're really excited. We've been doing the same thing, send-offs, posting a lot of pictures, and hopefully get into a lot of games in the fall, you know. I mean, the other half of the job is, I said I've been to more high school hockey and basketball and football games than I can count probably since I've worked here.
I think it's the best kind of boots on the ground marketing that you can do, though, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're going to a game, you usually already know an athlete, so then you can just kind of coordinate with that parent. And I'll say I built a fair portion of my book of business just through sitting next to a parent I know, and they're gonna be like, "Oh, hey, have you met PJ? He trains Bobby.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby loves it. Like, you got to go check out Maxway." I'm sitting watching a sporting event and networking and kind of pitching business and creating relationships, and it's like kind of a fun way to do it. It's better than sitting cold calling, right?
Yeah.
You know, and watching sports.
Well, it's like the Cosgroves always have this acronym that I loved, GIFT. So get in front of them. And, you know, especially in fitness, you hear all these people talk about like marketing and online advertising, and some of that stuff has its place, obviously. But there's nothing more valuable than what you just said. Like, I have coaches who work for us who want more clients. And I'm like, all right, well, the clients you currently have, go hang out with them, because you're going to inevitably get into their social circle, whether it's their kids' social circle or their social circle, by going to games, and they introduce you to somebody else, and then they introduce somebody else, and then you're the guy in that neighborhood or the girl that everybody wants to refer them to. And yeah, it's not that hard to go sit at like a high school game and shoot the shit with the parents. Like, it's kind of a really enjoyable part of my week. I'm like, oh, I get to go to a game tonight. So if you're someone listening, I mean, they really appreciate it too. Like the kids really they light up when they see you in the stands. The parents really shows to them that you care. And so, I mean, for us, I think it's invaluable. Courtney, who works for us, I would say, like, she goes to more games than anyone I've ever seen. I feel like her whole week her nights are often like, I got a game here, I'm going to go to a game here. And we're already mapping out the schedule for some of our kids who left this week for the fall. So a nice little added bonus, but also a great marketing tool to get more people in the door. So
yeah, Andy McCloy and Luca, they were just talking about that, the two styles, the new school versus the old school, and this kind of sitting in the stands and building it grassroots style is more like the old school model. But you got to do both, and I think that like you said, being in front of them is it's the most ROI I've ever seen on advertising and marketing, in my opinion, is me getting in front of handfuls and handfuls of adults that are just qualified leads right off the bat.
Yeah, they always say like the cost of acquisition for a client, like paying for ads and things like that. Like, I think to get into like a high school hockey game, sometimes it's free, but it might be like $10. So that's a good marketing investment right there. It's a write-off for you. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, so you're from New Hampshire. How did you get into, you know, personal training, strength and conditioning, and what was your first job? Were you at the health club to begin with, or like, how did you get there?
Yeah, so I grew up on the western side of New Hampshire, so Lake Sunapee region, really, really small town. Like, I graduated with 50 kids, right? So small school. 3-sport athlete, played everything, because if you didn't play all three, you didn't have enough to field the entire team, right? I would say that was my first kind of introduction into strength training, was just training as a teenage kid because I wanted to be stronger and bigger for football and basketball or whatever it was. Went to college in Maine, small school, but I ended up playing lacrosse. So I'm a big advocate for as many sports as possible, because I played a college sport that I had never touched before, and it was low level, but it was like it kept me in school, it kept my grades up because I was part of something, so it was good. Graduated college in '09, and then my first job out of college, I was a long-term special education aide, and I coached football and lacrosse at a Winnicott High School, which is in Hampton. And it's kind of come full circle with Winna, but I was at Winnicott for like 2.5 years. I lost that position because the principal didn't renew a federal grant that was paying me. So I kind of got like pushed out into the world, and I was like, oh, okay, well, what can I do now? But I really enjoyed coaching, like the being part of a team, being around the kids, being in the weight room, being on the field.
What did you study at school?
I'm sorry. So I had a psychology degree. So
Okay.
I had psychology and sports management.
Mhm.
So I kind of went a little bit of a untraditional route. Like I'm not an exercise science guy. I'm not a kinesio major. I went psychology and sports management. I thought I was going to go to graduate school to be a sports psychologist, but I didn't want to take the GRE, and I was kind of done with school. To be honest, I was kind of good. I was ready to not be a student for a minute. But then it ended up being the best learning years of my life were afterwards. In secondary education, just figuring it out on my own. But I got thrown, like I had a connection of a family friend, and I got a job kind of doing a little bit of everything at a commercial gym. So this was 2013. I was like checking people in. I was like cleaning stuff. I got my first personal training. It was like a AFA or something like. It was like one of the easy weekend ones.
Yeah.
And that was my first cert. That was it. And then I started like helping with like group style classes and kind of like some strength based stuff there. And then I got the opportunity to work at what I would say like is a group fitness gym, like an adult fat loss body composition. It's still to this day, a very successful gym. And I would say I cut my teeth training there. Big groups. It was an adult, large group style classes. And then I kind of helped start their small group personal training aspect of it. I kind of ran my course there and missed something. And I couldn't really figure out what it was. But at that point, I hadn't been training kids anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wasn't around teens. I wasn't around sport, like training anything. I wasn't coaching anything anymore. I was like, what am I doing? And then that's literally when I took a summer off from kind of doing anything. I was mowing grass at a golf course. And that's when you guys came out with the CFSC. I was like, all right, cool. I don't have to take a standardized, it's more practical. Like I can show that I can coach. I can show that I can do something. And that's when that hit. So I got the CFSC. I was in I think I was in like one of the very first crews.
So I think you were. Yeah, I think you might have been in the first group.
Yeah, I really think I was too. And then from there, I kind of just threw my resume out at a bunch of like a commercial gym that was in town. It was like a small little chain. It was owned by one person. And I just dropped my resume off. And on paper, I looked okay. So I got a call back, and my proposal to the guy was like, look, I'm trying to start a youth program. This is what I've been missing. There isn't, in my opinion, quality training in the area. Here's my proposal. And I started out just as a W-2 coach. So I was just like, they gave me a run and then go get clients. So I was like selling personal training to adults best I could. And then I tried to build a youth program, and I was there for about 4 years. And I would say that's where I learned that my wife is way more patient than I am. Because if I had left to open my own spot when I thought I was ready, I probably would have failed and fallen flat on my face. But I have a very smart wife, and she was able to kind of hold me back, and it was good. So I kind of was ready to go 18 months before I actually left, but it gave me enough time to kind of get my ducks in a row. Because I kind of bootstrapped the transition into Maxway. So, kind of getting into that gym ownership mode, I guess I was just.
I want to put the brakes on and touch on a few things that you went over. And so this timeline, that's what, 2009 to when?
I opened Maxway the summer of 2019.
Okay, so this is a really good point. First off, probably the most important thing is you married the right person.
Yeah, I outkicked my coverage so far.
Because I always say that's the most important decision you make. And so it's very hard to do any of these things. It's like starting a business if you don't have the right person supporting you. So good job on that decision. So you just said there's a 10-year timeline there from when you graduated college to when you open your own business, right? And on top of that, you don't even have a degree in strength and conditioning, right? And I think a
No,
lot of people get caught up on that idea, like, oh, do I have to go back to school? Do I have to get a degree in this? And the reality is you don't. It can be helpful. And in certain paths, if you want to get into collegiate or professional, that might be a hang up, right? But I can tell you a lot of our staff members don't have degrees in exercise science, kinesiology, ex-phys. They're self-taught. And they took a path like you, right? And you had a passion. One thing you really realized from the beginning is you had a passion for coaching, right? And you didn't get yourself hung up on that as much as you knew what you wanted to do and started to pursue that regardless. And I think that's a couple of things I want to touch on after that. But I think that's a really important thing for people to realize if you're a younger coach listening to this, that like I had a kinesiology degree. I probably had a more traditional path. Many people don't. I mean, Mike's an athletic trainer by degree. So not even strength and conditioning. So it's just something that I think is important, that if you're set on doing this for a career, don't get hung up on what your diploma says. Because at the end of the day, you can still make your way in.
I think the diploma is the least of the worries.
Yeah. And then another thing that I thought was interesting is, like, I think people don't realize the time that's necessary. You said, like, hey, if I'd gone out earlier, I probably would have failed. I have a lot of young coaches who I think now, especially, they feel pressure to be successful immediately because they see a lot of people online in their 20s who own a business or make a bunch of money or have a nice car, whatever the social pressures that come from seeing everybody else. And they think, like, I need to have that now. But they realize they're only seeing a highlight reel of a lot of these other people.
For sure. And those 10 years were hard. Like, and like I was cutting grass at a golf course every summer, not only because I was getting paid, like while I was like learning how to coach and coaching at all those gyms, like I was still cutting grass on the summer so that I could A, not have to spend money playing golf, and B, make a little extra money. Right. I was bouncing at a local bar to save money for my wedding of the woman that's way out of my league. Right. Like at the point, like I valeted cars while I was training, like, and it just, I kind of always went into it with a long-term vision, because I wouldn't survive very long in a cubicle setting. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I saw this path and it made sense. And we can dive into a little bit of like where the name Max really comes from in my mission. And I think that like a lot of the people who kind of get into the mindset of like, oh, I'm going to open a gym, they're like, well, it's going to be good money. Like it's going to be so easy. Everybody's going to want to come to my gym. Like it's going to be super simple. And if you don't have a really solid like reason or drive of why you actually want to do this, you're never going to make those 10 years that it actually took me to feel relatively confident of hanging out on my own. And it's a journey, right? And I think like that was like the apprentices like used to apprentice under a master for 10 years before they would call themselves a master. And it's like, people are so quick to be like, well, this isn't working. It's like, well, how long you been trying?
Yeah. I mean, I always go back, like, I like listening to Mike's story because, you know, he was just an AT at BU. And then he kind of invented the strength and conditioning job there, like, and started doing it. And meanwhile was bartending, and then he had the Bruins and he was bartending and he was doing all these other things. And people only see MBSC or see him now, but he like that was into his 30s, right? And so people think like, you know, a guy like Mike now is who he always was, and he was working, doing real estate, buying places, things like that. And so it's a long road that a lot of people don't see or talk about. So I think it's important, like when you say like, listen, I was cutting grass, like I worked in a shot at country club, I was tending bar, I was serving, I was doing anything they asked me to do Friday, Saturday, Sunday when I get done coaching Monday through Thursday, and because that would help me pay my bills, right? And then until eventually I had enough under me, and that was a long time until we kind of got the ball rolling. So it's important to hear that piece of the journey for people, because a lot of people might walk into your gym now and think like, oh, it's so great you have this. You're like, oh, imagine all the work I did to get here. And even when you're there, it's not easy.
Right. And I think that something that like I would say that I'm still a very young business, and I view Maxway as a very young business. And like I try to stay in startup mode, almost like thought process of like, okay, we got to keep going, we got to keep going, we got to keep going, trying not to get like complacent.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really challenging, and I think especially in the world of social media and how everybody puts their best foot forward, that like I'm not comparing my year 3 or year 4 to somebody's like Mike who's in year 30,
Yeah.
right? Or the gym down the street who's in year 15, right? And it's that comparison of like where you are and where you feel you should be are completely different things. And I think that just being able to be appreciative of how far I've come. Like I have pictures on my phone of like the very first spot that I was given in the commercial gym to kind of like outfit myself and like train my groups.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an old squash court. Like like not even a full racquetball size court, like a squash court. So it was tiny. And it was still the wooden floors, and I had like a small dumbbell rack, and I made do. So I think like being appreciative, like, because if you walked into my gym now, like you wouldn't think that I did that. So I think that being able to see and appreciate where you've been, but then not judge and compare yourself to where other people are, because that can be just a dicey mix.
Yeah. And so let's rewind to you're at the sports club, right? And what was it that made you feel like you were ready to make the jump? You had said like, hey, I wanted to go before, and my wife kind of helped hold me back until I was really ready to do it. What was it that you knew, hey, I'm ready to go do this now?
I would say it's probably a couple different things, right? So like my ego would have told me that I was already ready.
Yep.
Right. Like I was ready years beforehand. Why would it take me this long? So my ego was already ready. I would say a couple different things. I would say that there were people who were questioning why I hadn't yet.
Mm-hmm.
And like people that I respected, right?
Yeah.
Like not like Billy Bob that comes down the street and trains with me and he's a 15-year-old, you know what I mean? He's just like, oh, why don't you have your own spot?
Yeah.
Right? Like these are like people that I valued their opinion, and it's like they're like, hey man, like what are you doing? Like what's the plan? What are you doing here? And I would say like at the root of it, and we can dive into this kind of can of worms if we want, but like my mental health was suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So like I was basically having like clockwork Monday morning panic attacks, getting ready to go to work. And I think that that's what my wife saw, to be like, hey, you know, maybe we should take a chance on this. And now my wife was 6 months pregnant with our second baby when I quit my job and signed the lease and did that. So it's like she kind of knew that it wasn't good for me overall. And I mean, stress is stress. So it's like I just traded the stress of that for something else. But it was the numbers that I knew I was doing, my gut feeling of what I could retain because I wasn't moving far, and the fact that I had the support of my wife, I would say, is like at that point, like you can't fail if you don't quit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of go.
And you talk about having the anxiety and the scaries, and even, you know, the people saying to you like, why aren't you ready? I always feel like nothing grates on me more when, you know, you have a belief in yourself and you're not acting on it, whether it's like imposter syndrome or, you know, fear of making a jump, and you have other people who are almost saying like, why aren't you doing the thing you're supposed to be doing? And you know deep down that you know that that's what you're supposed to be doing, and that's probably where a lot of that anxiety and comes from, because you're like, you feel like you're not pursuing the thing you're supposed to be pursuing. And what I like how you said, like, I did it, you know, I'm waiting on the birth of my second kid. I was talking to somebody about having kids the other day, right? And they said something along the lines of like, oh, well, it's not the right time. And I said, it's never the right time. And it's the same thing with opening a business. If you wait for the right time,
you'll never do it.
There's never a convenient time to have a kid or open a business, because there's always going to be a reason why it's inconvenient, and it's going to be inconvenient.
For sure.
And you talked about kind of trading stress. And I think the difference is like, you're going to be stressed whether you're doing something you love or doing something that you hate. And what makes good stress is something you're passionate about. It's easy. Like, you can be stressed, but if you're passionate about what it is, you can funnel that stress into something that you really care about, and put that towards something positive. Whereas if you're stressed about something you hate, there's only one way out of that, and it's to not do it. And so,
Right, right, right.
I think that point all points to you making the right choice.
Yeah, I think so too. Thank you. Yeah, and I think that I did a lot of kind of like deep thinking and just kind of like really being introspective of what I was doing. And I mean, we can get into where the name Maxway came from. And I feel like being at the sports clubs and not really kind of being forthright of like what I wanted to call the business, what I wanted to call the program, I was almost holding something back that whole time, right? Where now I ventured out on my own and I'm able to kind of plant my flag with my own name and all that. And Maxway comes from two of my friends. So I had two friends that passed away quite young. One of their names was Davis Hemingway, and then the other one's name was Jacob Maxfield. So that's where the Max and the Way come from. Davis drowned when we were 16. So we was like right before our junior year of high school. And then Jacob fell asleep driving in '08. So it was right before I graduated from college. And I grew up walking to the rec center and playing sports, and their dads kind of took care of me. I didn't grow up with my dad, so their dads, like Chad bought me my first set of golf clubs. So we talk about like me mowing grass while I'm trying to do this. It's like I was given these opportunities, thankfully from people that took after me, right? Coaches, like they taught me how to play t-ball, they taught me how to play Pop Warner football. They were basketball coaches. They did all these things, but they were always there around sports. And I think the biggest thing that I kind of took with me was that my favorite memories were created or either around sports, like around the rec center, and doing all of those activities, walking to kind of the rec center after school with Davis and Jake. All of our moms were in education, right? So my mom's an elementary school nurse. Davis's mom was a high school nurse, and then Jacob's mother was like the elementary school principal. So like we were all just kind of shuffled out onto our own until all of our parents were done with school. And we learned how to play sports. We learned how to deal with being in a group. We learned how to lift once we got old enough. And then Davis and Jake were taken too early. And it's like, that's where I was like, well, what am I? I did the same thing that they did, right? Like I was doing all the same stuff. I used to rock, quarry, jump, and I used to do all that. I used to drive late at night. Like it could have been me. Why am I still here? What am I doing? So it was really hard for me. And I've battled with depression and anxiety my whole life. I've been pretty open and honest about it, just outright. I feel like it helps me, but then if I can talk about it, then kids in my gym feel comfortable talking to me about it, and it's just an avenue for conversation. But I went through a lot of stuff, and I tried to figure out why I was here and what I was doing, and that's how kind of Maxway came about, was because now the vehicle that I use is strength and conditioning coaching. But what I'm really doing is I'm trying to foster an area of space for these kids to make friends, to deal with things, to learn how to do things that are challenging, to put effort in and not see results immediately, right? Like all the things that strength and conditioning teaches, like we're trying to do that and trying to mentor these kids. And I think we've really kind of dialed in a pretty cool niche with our community where we're servicing kind of second graders to grandparents and everybody in the family. So it's been a journey, and you can see like in the logo the MW, but it also looks like PJ. So all of us are back together again, and it's taken me a minute to kind of like feel like I'm doing something of value and being okay with all the hard work, right? Like you said, like you can beat yourself to the bone and you can be coaching 14, 15, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. But if you're not doing it for somebody that appreciates you or cares about you, you're basically running yourself ragged and you're going to burn out. It's going to be all over. But when I was renovating into the new space and my kids had to be home for 25 days because of COVID stuff with daycare, and my wife was reffing basketball and I had the other gym operational, like it's hard. But if you know why you're doing it and if you have a solid reasoning behind it, like it's whatever, you just do it.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like what you just described is like leaving a legacy, right? To represent them, to represent the things that you're passionate about, and be able to, hopefully those kids who you work with kind of have that same retrospective look at their experiences and say, oh, these were my really valuable experiences, is like the times I went and trained there, the times I was coached by the people in your facility. And you hit the nail on the head when you said, like, you're going to still have really hard days and long days, but if you're clear on your why, the what becomes really easy, because you know why you're doing it. It's not the same when you're doing something you don't care about. And
For sure.
so again, it makes it a lot easier to work hard if you are clear on your why and you know what you want. So I think you're definitely doing that pretty clearly. So when you made the jump to go open Maxway, that's like the scary part for everyone. That's where a lot of the questions are that I always hear from people who want to start a facility. Like, how do you start? Like from a financial standpoint, finding a building. Like those are things that like I mean, it doesn't matter if you had a kin degree, a psych degree, even a business degree. A lot of people don't know how that even happens and think like, hey, am I going to be able to get a loan? Am I going to be able to get money? Am I going to be able to find the space? Like, how did you go about figuring out how to make that jump?
Yeah. So I think it takes a lot longer than you think it does. Like it's going to take you a lot longer to get ready and kind of know what questions to ask. I think that's the hard part, at least initially, is that like a lot of us don't go into this with like the MBA background, right? We don't go into it with a business background and being like, okay, I already built my business plan in college. Like we're just implementing it now. Like you got to learn the questions to ask to know what you need to do. So I think a lot of it, that's where I'm thankful that it took me longer to pull the trigger on opening, because it made sure that I was ready. It made sure that I did all the budgeting that I could. I pre-bought and I had a lot of equipment in a storage unit for months months before I had a rack sitting in a storage unit for about 12 months before I even used it. I had a full 3-tier dumbbell set, 5 to 100, sitting in my garage for like 7 months. Like I because I would find the deals that I could, and I paid cash for a lot of the stuff over the years, right? And I was holding it. I think so. Being savvy with your money, I think, is important, especially like if you're not rolling into it with a big bankroll, which I don't think many of us are. Like
Yeah, exactly.
I bootstrapped it. So I was always conservative with my money, and I didn't lend a lot of equipment. So I think like I was very minimal on the equipment, and I only bought new equipment when we needed it, and like we're like busting at the seams. Hey, we need another barbell to do landmine stuff. Hey, we need another set of hey, we need another trap bar. Hey, we need another bike. Like it was one offs. Like I didn't go and buy 10 of everything, assuming that I'm going to have 10 people every hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the biggest thing is like assume that you need way less equipment than you need.
Yeah. And,
right. That's one. I think 2 is assume that the flooring is way more expensive than you think it is.
the most expensive thing in a gym, I always say, people are like, what's the most expensive thing here? I'm like, you're standing on it.
It's flooring by and large. It's ridiculous. And I think you need to know numbers. I think you need to, ideally you already have a book of business going. Like for me, like I tracked, like I was a personal trainer, but when I left the commercial gym, I had 2 coaches working my program.
Yep.
So I was technically already paying some payroll, even though it wasn't payroll, and I was tracking all of my numbers. So I had hard data for 4.5 years of what I was doing weekly, right? So I saw I could build out and forecast based on trends seasonally for years before I even opened, because I was tracking my numbers that well, because that's how I was getting paid for the commercial gym. So I was able to kind of have an idea of what my numbers could be if I did exactly what I have been doing, right? And then I assumed kind of like 3 scenarios. It was like worst, okay, and then better. And like worst case was like 10% of my people came with me. Better was, or like good was like half my people came with me. Better was like 75% of my people came with me. So I was like, that was the gamble. Right. Like I did a small friends and family, but I opened Maxway for little money.
Yeah.
Little money. And I think a big piece of it was I pre-bought a lot of the equipment. I already had a lot of it before I was ready to like go. And I knew my numbers and I had a pretty good book of business already, and I wasn't leaving a complete demographic. Right. A lot of fitness people will say, well, it's like 8 miles. 9 miles is what your fitness radius is. And you're not going to get people if you're outside of that radius. You will if it's like specialty stuff. And like, I feel like people travel for kids. I know at least hockey parents do at least. But I think me staying in my general region was really important. The relationships that I had with my book of business already, like the clients that I had a pretty good gauge on it. Um, and then I was able to make my numbers work on my worst case scenario. Kind of like I was like, all right, if shit really hits the fan and less than 20% of my people actually come with me, can I still survive the first 6 months to get things going, right? And then shoot, I probably went through almost a dozen and a half like facilities
Yeah.
searching, right? Like I looked, and it's not like there's not much commercial or combo warehouse space with what you're looking for, with all this in the geographic region that you want at a price point that you can afford, right? So it's like I found my first location via Craigslist. Hand to God. I, I did. I found it. I found it via Craigslist, and it hit. And it used to be, it was like a kitchen and bath place. So they were like cutting granite countertops and stuff like that. And I think one thing that I do pretty well is that I can walk into a space and I can envision how a gym should roll, like how
Mm-hmm.
it should look, how it should be set up for ease of use, for functionality. And I would say definitely with the lens of how the CFSC programs, which is pretty much how we program, and how like our function can work. So I can go into an empty warehouse space and say, all right, I would put this here, this here, this here, and I can kind of picture that. Um, maybe I do it better than everybody else. I don't think so, but I was able to kind of walk into the space. And it's like, all right, I can make this work. And then like by the grace of God, like the rack that I had already built fit friggin' perfectly. Right. So
Yeah.
it's like a lot of things kind of set up for me, but I would say I went very minimal to start. I assumed almost the worst case scenario. And I didn't overbuy on equipment. Like Cressy's talked about it before, where it's like I'm going to stay in as small of a space as I can until I need to get into a bigger space,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm going to stay in that space for as long as I can until I need to get into a bigger space. I'm not going to start with a 10,000 square foot facility when I can do everything I need to in 1,200 or whatever it was. So
Yeah. I mean,
the
that's the
first,
biggest thing I hear. Like with, I think all these coaches, when they want to open that gym, they're thinking short term. They're like, they want to see this amazing facility, and when they first open, and realize like that facility you want is probably 10, 20 years down the road. In
yeah,
reality, like I know MBSC has had iterations in a million different
for
locations.
sure.
I've seen a couple of them, and even from the equipment standpoint, like really smart. Like you can get cheap equipment on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or from someone's yard sale, and we still bring in equipment. Mike still sometimes comes dragging stuff in that he found on the side of the road or he saw on like Craigslist.
I
That
I just found a brand new set of like 30, like 10 to 30 hexagonal, like perfect brand new dumbbells at the dump. I was like doing the trash run with my 5-year-old, and I was like, "Hey, are you getting rid of those?" I was like, "Oh yeah, you can just put them right in the back of my truck." And I literally drove them right from the dump right to my gym. So this is perfect. It's like, why would I go spend $800 on that if I don't need to? Right?
Yeah.
So that's where it's like the what you think you need to do and show off and all that, I think can get in the way. Like when I opened the gym for business, my first technical session in like the first spot that we were in was my longest term client, Tony. And I called Tony bugging the crap out of me. PJ, when are we going to go again? And I'm like, Tony, I'm painting a wall right now. Like, give me a second. And I couldn't get him to stop. And I go, Tony, all right, 1:00, see you. And what he didn't know was that I had just loaded up the 5 to 100s into the back of my truck, and his his training session was going to be unloading and moving all of those dumbbells. And like that was like my first paid session in the new gym was like Tony unloading my dumbbells and moving them and placing them on the rack. Like I timed him, I did everything.
A lot of carries today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you said another thing too is like you were in there doing the work yourself. I remember you telling us, "Hey, I'm ripping this out, I'm painting this," and people always think, "Oh, I'm going to get all these contractors to do it." Well, you pay a lot for labor, and so being handy goes a really long way to fix things, or when you move into a new space, if someone's not going to pay for a build out, to start to do things on your own. And again,
For sure.
not skills that a lot of people might have going into it, but you can go on YouTube and you can learn how to do a lot of stuff.
And the thing is, what I have found is that you're going to have a couple members that all they want to do is help you.
Yes.
and they have skills that you don't.
Hmm.
And there are people who hopefully listen to this and they're like, oh, PJ has zero handy skills. And I like opening the gym, I little to no skill at all. And I really still don't have many. But like you said, like contractors are expensive, professionals are expensive. And if it's swing the sledgehammer to knock down a wall, like I'm pretty good at breaking stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And then I can watch YouTube and I can call my member Dave and be like, hey, Dave, this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking I'm going to, and he's be like, PJ, you're an idiot. I'll be right there. And then Dave's going to, and then I'm going to learn how to do it. Right.
Yeah.
And then next time I'll be a little bit better at it. So it's like, there have been so many instances where it's like, the only thing that I can do is be like, I don't know how to do this. I need some help on like where I can go to figure this out. And I think if you go into it being like, I need to have all of the answers before you open your gym, I didn't even know what the questions were. So if I waited for all the answers, I would have never opened. So it's like you gotta have a little bit of faith in your own resolve, right?
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
that's gonna be. I'm betting on myself at the end of the day, right? Like that's what all this is, and in the kind of the friends and family round that I kind of pulled together to start. One of the people was like, well, what are you going to do if this fails? And her husband looks at me and looks at her and goes, it's not like you can't, it's just not gonna.
Exactly.
You just don't, I just don't let it. I
Yeah.
coach
Burn
every
your
single,
boats.
right? Like you just figure it out. Right. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's one of those things where you're betting on yourself. And if you're going to try to pad, a six, you know what I mean? Like a 6-figure bankroll to start and like want to buy $80,000 worth of equipment because you think it looks really cool and there's going to be 20 people in your session day one. It's like, or you could do it with less and build up as you go. But I think that's people's perception of what people think of them or what people think that they should be doing to appease the people that they think they're thinking about, right? Nobody's thinking about you, right? So
Exactly.
nobody
Exactly.
is. So you just got to be able to bet on yourself and make sure that you're ready to go. I would say like ready to go and like in what you think you're capable of is like whatever comes at me, I have the skills I need to be able to figure out what I need to figure out, knowing that I'm not gonna know everything right off the bat.
And then, so you get in there, you're up and running. Did you have people lined up, employees ready to go, or like, how did you start to hire people and bring people
So
in?
I had two employees, were two people that were coaching for me, right? So that was the other kind of gamble was that I needed to take two people that I had brought on to coach in my programs, but were technically employees of the commercial gym to leave the commercial gym and to come and become my W-2.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, the two people that I have did. One of them is still with me. The other one has kind of moved on to a different role and just got married and is loving life. But that was a big piece. So I had two coaches right off the bat. So I would say I was already kind of operating a business before opening.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't technically going into my own bank account at the end of the day. I wasn't the owner of it. So bringing the two coaches with me, that was the end of August. So we're literally right around our 4th anniversary. So like the beginning of September, the end of August is our anniversary. And that was 2019. So then 6 months from there, COVID
Yep.
happened.
Right around the
So
corner.
yeah, the whole world shut down. It's like you don't really laugh. I can laugh about it now because I made it through the other side, but it was like it's like yeah, it was in my business plan. 6 months in, global pandemic.
We're going to be closed.
Shut your doors for 3 months. So that was hard. I mean, but again, one of those things where you hope you have the skills to be able to kind of pivot and figure out what you're going to do. If you had walked into my gym during the time we were closed, you would have thought that like I had liquidated everything.
Yeah.
But basically, we ran like a drive-through, and members came, and we gave them like a kettlebell, a band, and a dumbbell, and a ball, and this and that, and whatever. And we Zoomed a couple days a week. We wrote programs for people. And then because I didn't start in such a massive space, right, and I was kind of conservative on my footprint initially. Once we were open, I was able to section off the gym and kind of leverage our small size and our coaching to our advantage because we could control the narrative on who's coming in when.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't a commercial gym where you're hoping that it's slow when you're coming in and there's potentially 10,000 members, whatever it may be, right? Where I'm going to sign up for a time frame and I know only five. At that time we were doing five families, right? So again, getting back into the community, we were able to kind of like only have 3 families in the building, but it was like eight kids or whatever it may be because we have multiples. But we were able to kind of section off and keep a really strict ratio and kind of make people comfortable with coming back into the gym. 2 big garage doors helps, right? But because we were able to control the narrative, because our system was able to still work, people got the same experience and actually liked it more. I would say that something coming out of COVID that was hard was getting people to not think that they had their own pod system.
Yeah.
You gotta share the gym. Like, you gotta share everything. Like, somebody else can use your bench. And we'll still have members that like trained with us during COVID times, and they'll go and they'll like put their water bottle and a towel like on the bench in the spot in the squat rack that they want to use. It's like, we still gotta warm up, Bubba. Like,
they're trying to claim their spot.
Yeah, it's like they're party. Yeah, it's like the dog peeing on a fire hydrant. They're scenting. It's like, no, all right, buddy, you can use this space when we get there. It'll be all right.
Yeah, it's funny. Like we actually stuck with our pod system after COVID. Like, we made like a bunch of individual pods, and then we kind of stuck with that system. One, because we just found we were more organized, and that our clients, especially our adult clients, like really enjoyed it. But I'm always like, hey guys, for you, those of you who weren't here before 2020, like, you have it real good right now, because it was never like this prior. And everyone was just kind of fine with it. But once they got exposed to that type of like organization and space, it was very hard for us to go back the other way, because people are creatures of habit. And when they get a taste of something like that, where they have like, okay, I have my own set of dumbbells, I have my own set of kettlebells, I have my own rack, then it's hard for them to go back.
Yeah, it's like what you talked to about the adult clients kind of being like, they like the energy during the summer, but they don't like the busyness. And it's like, they'll say that, clients say it to me, it's like, man, like it when it's slow in here. It's like, I don't.
Yeah.
I would prefer it to be a little busy. Like, so it's like those fleeting moments of like a weird hour or whatever. And everybody's like, man, it was quiet. I really like that. It gives me anxiety. So cool. I'm glad you like it.
Exactly. And so one thing I know you've done, really well is kind of make inroads into community and organizations, schools, things like that in the area. And I actually had a phone call with someone from a gym a couple weeks ago about like, hey, how do you reach out to local organizations or make inroads with athletic directors or sporting groups? Because that can be a huge feeder system for you if you have a really good relationship with a local school or sporting organization, that you're a resource for them. And so kind of for you, how did you start to make those connections with, the local community to foster those relationships?
Yeah. So I would say 2 things right off the bat kind of strike me with that is that the grassroots stuff, the community days, going to youth soccer events, going into the community, like meeting the coaches, because a lot of time the youth coaches are the parents. So I think that like that's kind of one lane, and then like the schools, I think that's a whole other beast. So like let's touch on the just like the community aspect of it, right? Like local teams, like for us, it could be like PCSC, like Portsmouth City Soccer, or something like that, right? Any of those local hockey or local club teams where it's all relationship driven, right? Because somebody's got a guy, or I have a buddy who does this, or I know this guy, or this guy was this, or so I think that providing value, not being super selly, like not chasing short money. I think that that's the biggest thing is people have a pretty good radar for that, and people protect their crew, like their groups, whether it's their mailing list. Like if you just go up to a local club team and try to get onto their mailing list, like there's no chance. They will protect their people, right?
Yeah.
So I think that providing value from the get with no expectations of return on the other end is important. So I think like offering to do, like help them audit and teach them how to do a proper warm up. If it's baseball stuff, teach them how to do a proper arm care warm up or post throw, arm care, whatever it may be. Hockey, it could be like hip flexor, groin health. Soccer, it could be like hamstring, something like that, right? Basketball, it could be whatever, right? Like offering something for free, being, hey, I can help you guys with this. I just want to make sure that all your kids are feeling good and properly warmed up. I just want to help. And knowing that it's going to take years and like sometimes years to for that lead to kind of actually come to fruition to a paid client. But knowing that if you truly are in it for the right reasons, right, and are authentic behind trying to get into the community, you should be okay with having it take a couple of years to get a true like feeder system into it. If you're just expecting to get a quick steady feed of people instantly, like it's just not going to happen. So I think, and because I think people can tell, people read off of that. So I think that that's one of it, is just be a good person and provide value and show that you want to help the kids, and not expect something right off the bat. The schools, I think you gotta like, the hard part is like, a lot of the times it's a good old boys club. Yeah. So you gotta be in, and it's hard. I like, thankfully, like I'm bald and I can look like the part, but it's like, you have to know somebody. So this is coming full circle about that first job that I had post college. So that first job that I had post college was at Winnacunnet High School, which is the Hampton area high school. They were my first contract. So with that school, I have a contract with the SAU, and the SAU pays max way to place a coach there for a certain contracted number of hours. I would not have been able to do that without already kind of having some people in my pocket at the school. Not in my pocket, but meaning like they already know I'm a good human being. They know that I've been in the area for a long time. At that point, it's 10 years. I've been on the Seacoast for 10 years. At that point, still involved in youth athletics, in training, in the general area. So I've kind of shown my hand that, hey, I'm around. I'm a good, honest, true person. You're not going to find people like saying that I've done them wrong or harmed them. Like I'm not a scam, right? There's no snake oil. So knowing that I could have people that were already in the school that could vouch for who I was as a person, then I just got lucky that the new AD, so the new athletic director, was training at the commercial gym in the mornings, watching me train high school athletes. And he was always wearing winter gear. And he likes to lift, right? He's a big old meathead. He loves it. But he always had Winnacunnet gear on. I'm like, oh, like, what do you do? Like, who are you? Like, I used to coach there. I know a bunch of people there. He's like, oh, I'm the new AD. I'm like, oh, let's chat. Yeah. This is what I'm trying to do. And it was like, oh, well, like, what's your idea? It's like, well, you know how every athletic school has an athletic trainer. Like, I think that every school should have a strength coach. Here's my play. Here's what I want to do. From him liking the idea to me actually getting contracted was 2 years. Yep. Because I wasn't in the voting round for the budget. So I had just missed the voting round for the budget. So then I had to wait a calendar year to get into the voting. Then they had to approve the vote. And then it was like a full year. It was wild. So it's like, it's the slow play. It's just the slow play, like building the relationships. It's the only way that you can do it. And even then, like I've had relationships that have gone sour and I didn't do anything wrong, but my relationship wasn't as solid as somebody else. And it is what it is. So it's a slow burn from a school standpoint. I think I'm fighting a good fight with it. I'm not giving up, right? Like I'm okay with it because I think that every school, low income, high income, they should have a strength coach. Yep. Because it's a safety concern. So provide value for the community with no return. Make friends with the school and know that it's going to take a while. And then the third thing for the community is I've gotten some good connections with some surgeons. People get hurt and they're looking for quality training. And right now, one of my best referrals through the community is a surgeon in town. He knows that we do right by people and we have a pretty good mindset on how we train people. So it takes time. It's not going to be like a quick send a couple emails and boom, steady stream. It's going to take It's going to take months and months and years of just being a good human being. Because people aren't going to vouch for you if you're not. I think that's the kind of the root of it.
Yeah, and the common thread through all of those things you touched on is like relationship building, right? And not looking for immediate gratification. I always go back to that 20-year window idea, like you talked about, when you left that place on good terms, you had good relationships. Like, not everyone walks out of a job and everyone says like, oh, I really liked that guy.
Yep.
Usually sometimes people leave a job and they're like, oh, thank God they're gone, or like, you don't leave on good terms. And I always tell people, like, you don't understand that the relationships that you form, good or bad now, will eventually come around to you down the road, and they could either be a huge help and be assistance to you, or they could be a huge problem for you. And for you to go out and go back to the place where you started, they were probably like, oh, this is great. It's an added bonus as someone who was here before.
Yeah.
And then going out into the community, and we go back to that get in front of them idea. Go out there and say, what can I do to provide value for you? Rather than saying, what can you do for me?
Totally.
Because eventually if you provide value, they're going to want more of that. And they'll be at a place where they're willing to pay for it.
The Cal Newport be so good they can't say no, right?
Yes.
It's like if you've got the career capital, and if you are putting yourself, so you're the only logical choice. And I think that's how I've kind of positioned myself, is that, okay, maybe not now, but at some point, if you're a youth athlete or if you're an injured adult in the area, you're going to end up training here.
Mm-hmm.
So
you want Maxway to be synonymous in like the Portsmouth area with those things, right? And people will be like, well, there's only one place for you to go, and that's when the community does the work for you. More than anything, people come knocking on your door that you've never talked to before and just say, hey, I heard about this place.
Yep.
But there's a lot of work that goes into that.
Yeah, for sure.
And so now you moved into the new place, and you said you're coming up on a year. What was the decision when you decided, like we talked about, hey, you want to be bursting at the seams, and you want to think like, hey, it's time. I really have to find a bigger space. What pushed to that decision for you to make a jump?
So I think like probably two things. One being what's the saying in real estate? It's just like location, location, location. Mm-hmm. Right. So like where this facility is located is very advantageous for me, with a youth program being 3/4 of a mile sidewalk from a K-8 school for the town.
Wow.
Right. So like literally my son will be a kindergartner, but my nephew who's going into 6th grade is in the same school. Mm-hmm. And they're there from the time they're 5 until they're through 8th grade. Then they go to Portsmouth High School, but they walk, like kids will be walking down after school. Mm-hmm. So the location of it was huge. The reason why I was ready to leave, and I actually broke a lease, so I got lucky that they were able to find somebody to take over right when I wanted to leave, because mm-hmm. then I would have had to carry two leases, and that would have been too much. I had no more room to scale. So at the location where I was previously, where we would have been at maximum capacity, where people would have felt cluttered, right, mm-hmm. kind of on top of each other, wouldn't have been high enough for where I wanted. It was always going to be a first location. This location opened up. It's only about 1,300 square feet bigger. So I went from, in its entirety, a 3,000 square foot building mm-hmm. with about 1,000 of it being office and lobby, and 2,000 of a square, which is not awesome, of training floor. This space that we're in is like 4,300 square feet, and it's probably about 700 square feet of lobby and bathroom and stuff like that, office. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of it is training floor, but it's all linear, so it's all horizontal. Nice. So I went from like 40 by, what was it? It was like 35 by 35 to like 50 by 78 or something like that. Mm-hmm. So like all linear square footage. So it was, the location was primo for where I wanted long-term to be for the school and my demographic. It was off of the main road, so the lease point was actually less. So even though it was 1,300 square feet bigger, it wasn't a huge jump mm-hmm. rent-wise. So that was really nice. And it's like, it was a mile from the other gym. So I got closer to some people, but I really didn't move that. I moved one stoplight away, essentially.
Yeah.
And it all just kind of, the stars aligned. The space that I'm in used to be a maintenance barn for a golf course. They tore down the golf course, and now it's a 55 up gated community, which
Oh,
helps.
wow.
But this was the cart barn, what we were in. And the first thing I had to do was take down a massive wall. So it was like a wall that it cut the building into two identical units.
Yeah.
And I took down a floor to ceiling. It was like it was 78 by 16. The wall was 16 feet high. So it was a 78 foot long by 16 foot high wall that I took down in chunks. And then I put this was crazy, Kevin. Like, I'm like sawzalling stuff at like 11:30 at night, like. But then I take like whole sections of the wall down and I put it on a trailer, and now I built a shed at my house with the walls I took down from the gym.
Oh,
So
good job repurposing.
I'm being resourceful. I mean, so moving was tough. It cost me more money than I thought. So here's a lesson: moving facilities, assume it's going to be about 30% more than you think. Because I wish I had taken a little bit more. Like I got like just a simple term loan, because again, flooring is going to be the most expensive thing that you get. So it's like I had to buy a whole bunch of new turf, had to buy some more flooring, but a lot of the stuff I didn't have to buy that many more dumbbells. The dumbbell, like my rack is still the same rack, right? My biggest expenses moving were light bulbs, flooring, and then a cement wall to throw med balls off.
Yeah, none of the exciting things, right? Light bulbs, flooring, and a wall.
Yeah. It's like rubber flooring and turf, LED light bulbs, a bunch of them, and paint, and a mason to come in and build me a wall. That was it. That was my biggest expenses.
So that's amazing.
Yeah.
And how many people do you have working in there now?
Yeah, so now we're up to, there's 6 of us total. So we started with 2 coaches, and now we're 2, 4, 5. Yeah, I make 6. So I still coach some. I probably have like 12 to 15 hours on the floor, just so that I can. It doesn't mean that I'm not in the gym, but I would say like designated coaching hours, so that I can kind of still be around the people. I enjoy it. It gives me a reprieve from the business side of it, and the business side of it gives me a reprieve from the training side of it. But I'm able to build out the lifestyle that I like the hours that I'd like. Meaning I've been particular and probably paid more in coaching hours out because I've wanted to be home at a certain time, or I've wanted to stay home for my kids. So I think that you got to be real. You have to have a real honest conversation with yourself about like what you want to do. Like there was something, I think Mike posted, it was like 80% of the time you spend with your kids is before they're 8 or something. Like it was something wild like that. And it's like I had the opportunity to be able to adjust my schedule so that I could be home with the kids 4 days a week to bring them to daycare whenever I wanted. And I was okay paying a little extra per week in payroll so that I could have that time and those experiences with my kids. Same thing on the other end. Like I could coach every night until 7 o'clock if I wanted to, but I want to be home at 5:30 so that I can cook dinner and eat dinner and see my kids before they go to bed. Because think about it. Like if I open the gym, I'm in the gym before it's 5:15, whatever it is. And then if I close the gym, it's 7:30, whatever it is. Like I may not see my kids that day.
Yeah.
Because they're asleep when I leave and they're asleep when I come home. It's like, well, is that worth whatever I would have paid a coach to be there? And it's like, not every day, no chance. No chance. So I think that that's something that people don't really feel like, oh, well, I'll just work all of it. And it's like, well, maybe you want to have a family. So slow down what you think you're going to have for growth potential just a minute. You know what I mean? And that's where I think like I have a longer term mindset. So I'm not in such a rush. I'm in a rush, right? And I have things that I want to do, but I know that I can get there. So if it's going to take me an extra week because I want to spend some time with my kids, or if I may not hit my goals, my 3-year goal into year 4, but I got to experience every single one of my kids' games or whatever it was, like I think that that's a pretty fair trade. So I think it's being able to kind of know what you want to expect from yourself.
Yeah, and I think for me, that's the number one reason I like to own my own business and essentially work for myself, because I want that autonomy to decide, hey, here's a day when I'm going to work a lot and work hard, and here's a day when I want to be able to be home with my family, or go to this event or whatever it might be. That's the payoff in freedom that you get for the investment of time and stress that you put into starting a business. I think that if like you're just going to work your balls off all the time and sacrifice everything else, you might as well just go work for somebody else. They say like, you work for yourself, you work for a crazy person sometimes. And that's not, and it's an easy thing to get sucked into, especially I think when people like us tend to think like, well, I can solve the problem or I can do it. But ultimately you're making a sacrifice on the other end. And that's really important thing for people to hear, and for you to be able to back off from always having the trainer hat on. You go to that E-Myth idea, the story about the woman making all the pies, and not be the person making the pies all the time, and being able to step back and let other people do it. You gain so much in freedom and clarity, to be able to take a view of your business from the outside as well. In doing that, and it's about figuring out how to balance it. You don't want to be the absentee owner, but you also don't want to be, on the floor, from sun up till sundown.
But you also have to be able to bake the damn pie.
Yeah.
Right? Like, hold on, let's talk about that for a second. Like, if you're gonna open a gym and you're not the business guy of the gym,
yeah,
you need to be able to train. You need to be able to be a good coach. That should be a given, right? And I think that sometimes that's like mixed, and it's like, oh, you want to go open your gym? You don't even have the reps in yet of being a good quality coach.
No.
So it's like, don't forget that you have to be able to bake a good pie if you want to be the one telling people how to bake the damn pie.
Exactly. There's a lot of people now who, you're right, they haven't gotten the reps in before they try to jump in, and then that ends up being a disaster. You have to not only be able to do it yourself, but then be so good that you can teach other people how to do it, and that's a whole nother skill. But yeah, that is a very important point to make, because you had a long road prior to being the place where you are now.
For sure. And I think sometimes, like, even for, you put a schedule out for a young coach and it's like a split shift, right? Where it's like, hey, I need you to come in from 6 to 8, 6 to 9, and then I need you to come in from 2 to 6. Like, oh, man. And it's like, well, like, everybody, you have to prove that you can do that.
Yes.
To then be able to have the right of not doing that. Right? Like, you need to show me that you can show up on time on a Saturday morning. You show up, you need to prove to me that you can open the gym if I need you to open the gym on time, ready to go. Like, then you don't necessarily have to be the low man on the totem pole, right? Like, you don't have to be the one that's the gopher, or the one that has to get the crappy shifts, or whatever it may be, right? Like, you can kind of earn your way out of it by being consistently a good quality coach and a good quality human being. So I think that those things, it's like, you want so much so quickly, prove that you deserve it, I think is a big piece of it, right? Like, you shouldn't just be given stuff. Like, I joke about it with the kids, right? They'll come in and be like, PJ, I did the whole warm up. It's like, look, guys, like, if I show up to work on time, I don't get so I'm supposed to show up to work on time. So, like, you shouldn't get extra praise or like kudos or like great job, because like you did what you were supposed to do. That's what you were supposed to do, right? Like, I don't get it. Like, if you were like, hey, PJ, I taught this new athlete didn't really know something, I like went over and I showed her what to do, it'd be like, hey, like, thank you. That's like above and beyond, right? You know what I mean? It's people's expectations of what they should get right off the bat are not necessarily on par with either their skill set or B, what they've earned. And I think that a lot of the time you need to earn some things before you expect some things.
100%. That's a good soundbite right there. Awesome, man. Well, I enjoyed the conversation. This was great. I think it was really valuable for people who want to do what you're doing. Hearing it from a recent perspective, like you said, you opened in 2019, but hearing the whole kind of journey behind that and the things that you went through are really important takeaways for people. So I appreciate you sharing everything that you shared. And if there's anything you want to tell people where they can find you, that would be great. And thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. This was fun, and I could chat with you and get on a soapbox and rant as long as you wanted me to. So anytime. Yeah, you can find maxwayperformance.com. So MAXWAY performance.com is our website. All of our social stuff is just Maxway Performance. My personal stuff is Strength by Strebel. My email is pj@maxwayperformance.com. I'm happy to answer any questions or kind of talk about the model that we do and how we go about things. Just happy to be here, feeling blessed to have a good combo.
Yeah, this was great. I'm sure I'll talk to you tomorrow at some point. So thank you, buddy. Have a great night.
Thanks,
and enjoy your day tomorrow.
Thank you too, man.